We're live? Am I pretty? Yeah, well, I guess we should be. I hope everything's fine technically. Hi, everyone. For the ones who don't know us, I'm Alexandra. I'm a professional cash game mid-stakes player. And I'm Run It Once coach. And I'm also doing mental performance coaching. And this is Paul.
Hey everyone, nice for you to join if you're there. No. Go on.
Yeah, we're gonna do a study session today on hands that we received from our students. From what I've seen, this is 10 and 25 NL. Yeah, we're going to look through the hands, give our thought processes. And before we get into that, just so you know, during the stream and maybe a little bit after the stream, there is a discount available on Run It Once where you can get an elite or an essential free month. So basically you pay for a month and you get another free one on top of that. This is available for both elite and essential. So yeah, I would advise you to take advantage of this offer. Yeah, you need to use the code STREAM at checkout. Paul is going to leave the details in the chat. And also, if you want to connect with us, maybe send us hands for future streams or for other study sessions, feel free to join our Discord community, which Paul is also going to link in the chat. Anything else to add before we look at the hands?
Let's jump in.
Is anyone here?
Yeah, we got some people watching. Okay. They're waiting for the poker content.
Okay. They don't care about us, do they? So we open ace queen 2.5x and we get 3-bet by what I would think is a recreational. I mean, we do see some rags using these very small 3-bet sizes, but in general, I would just assume this is a recreational. And then we get a cold call from the button, which from the small blind, which I also assume is not going to be a very good player. I don't think he should really have calls in this spot. So yeah, unless I have some reads, I think I would pretty much always 4-bet this. It doesn't play that well sandwiched, out of position, and it's definitely strong enough to raise against the small sizes. Also, taking the pot down pre-flop is already bringing us some big blinds. So, yeah, I think I would always 4-bet this. What are your thoughts, Paul?
Yeah, same as you, really. I would mostly just 4-bet this. I assume we're against two recreational players, and we're going to be dominating a lot of their range. Obviously, again, whenever you play against recreational players, you want to try and make notes and reads on who those recreational players are, because some recreationals may 3-bet way too tight. But when they use this small size in, they can have lots of junk hands, and lots of those hands we dominate. So I'd be happy just 4-betting this hand pre-flop.
Okay, our hero does go for a 4-bet, which I like. I think the sizing's fine. You could make it slightly bigger, but yeah, I think this is just fine. And we get a call from the button. We see a nice flop of queen a5. On these boards against regulars and even against recreationals, I don't think we need to range bet, especially because against racks, we can just pretty much play our hand, don't need to be super balanced. But with ace queen here, again, because I don't really want to think about being balanced, I think I would pretty much always bet something like 1/3 to even half pot, because I think his range is going to be quite full of under pairs and maybe some draws that are never going to fold. And yeah, just gonna go for value until the board gets too scary for him to call. Yeah, that's how I would play this one. What about you?
Yeah, pretty much the same. Against recreationals, just going to be playing my hand. So yeah, in this situation, obviously going for a c-bet. If I had some other hands that I had 4-bet with and didn't connect, maybe I wouldn't always go for a bet here. I'm not going to be looking to play GTO against recreationals, but same as Alexandra, probably looking to go for around a third or closer to half pot here with this hand. I think recreationals are definitely going to be calling their 9s, 10s, and jacks here. They have any 5x, 8x, or queen x. I think they'll always be calling as well. And I don't think they're going to be elastic to sizes either. So a jack 10 of hearts here should probably be folding against a half pot, I would imagine, or would be in a tough spot. Maybe it's a hand that mixes, but I don't think a recreational is going to know that. So yeah, I would just size up with my strong hands. And Doyle Smith asks in the chat, what would your sizing be here? And this was when he was talking about pre-flop. So I would go a little bit bigger than what we went pre-flop, but I think the main thing to ask yourself in game is, using a size that is going to keep in dominated hands, as well as being able to get enough money in with your the stronger portions of your range. And I think around what Villain went to around about 22, 23 big blinds here is going to be good, I think.
Yeah, personally, I don't mind the size. I think it's fine. I think 23 big blinds is probably the highest I would go, because I don't really want to get in a situation where I really incentivize him to shove. I really don't want to get shoved on with this hand, so I wouldn't go too large, probably between 19 and 23, something like that. Okay, on the flop we see a really small bet, which again is fine in 4-bet pots, usually, especially if we want to bet a bit more often, which I would say it's advisable because it's very unintuitive to defend. But against recreationals, I don't really want to have just one sizing, and I think this is too small in this particular scenario. I would like to make it a bit bigger. Also, I don't really mind making this into street game sometimes. So yeah, I think I would like to go bigger here, but we already talked about this. Anything to add?
No, sounds good. Let's see the turn.
Okay, the turn is a 9 of spades, which I think it's quite interesting because now a lot of his floats get there. We don't beat 9s anymore. He could definitely have sets sometimes. And usually we should slow down a bit on these flash turns, especially when broadways are blocked by the board, because they really reduce the amount of flashes we can have. In this spot, I don't really mind continuing with the ace of spades. I don't really mind checking either, especially if this guy is a bit aggro and he's going to find bluffs. Yeah, I think both are fine. What about you?
Yeah, again, I think against the recreational here, I don't mind continuing to bet here. I think we're still going to have the best hand very often, just because they're going to be so wide. So hands like King Queen off and King Jack off pre-flop shouldn't really get here. They should be folds against the 4-bet. But if a recreational is 3-betting those and then calling them against the 4-bet, obviously those are going to be the sorts of hands that he's going to be continuing here. And we just have a lot of equity. Obviously, top pair with the ace of spades. We're still ahead of hands like 10s and jacks and queen 10, queen jack, king queen type of hands. And any of those draws that I mentioned. Again, think recreational here can have all of the ace kings. So if he's got ace king with king spades, obviously that'll be continued. Even just folding out if we bet here and getting ace king without king of spades to fold is fine as well, I think. So I would probably just continue to bet against recreational, but I don't mind checking either.
Yeah, I think on most cards I would keep betting. On this particular one, because there's a bunch of draws that get there, such as 6-7, Jack 10, again 9s, 8-9 if he has that. So I would be, even against the recreational, I would tend to be a bit more careful here. I'm not sure how happy I would be to go for 3 streets of value. Therefore, I think if we do check, we can keep some of his bluffs in, like you mentioned, if he has ace king or king jack, those hands might just bluff us as well, and we can go for a bet check bet for value. But yeah, we give some free equity. I really don't mind either way. Oops. So we do check, apparently. I was a bit too quick. We check, and he goes for a half pot bet. My thoughts here is that even though usually we should have a bunch of check shoves in this SPR, this particular hand, I mean, yes, it would probably get called by some king queen and queen jack, queen 10 if he has that, but it's not like very frequent combos. And on the other hand, I feel like if we shove here, we probably just get his bluffs to fold and his value to call. So I think I prefer checking here and probably calling most rivers as well. Calling here and then probably calling most rivers as well. I don't think shoving here accomplishes as much, even though our hand looks good and the SPR is low. I don't think shoving's terrible, but I think it's lower EV than calling. What do you think?
I actually don't mind the shove, so I'm just slightly different here. I think most of his bluffs are going to have some form of equity once he stuck this much money in on the turn. I think if we shove, they're just going to continue to call. I can't really think of any bluffs that um, bet this size on the turn and then are going to be folding. And also, once you shove here, if he's making a mistake, like betting a hand like Queen 10 or Queen Jack or King Queen, I don't think these hands should be bet. But if they do, I think they're going to be calling. Same with tens and jacks. Again, don't think these hands should be betting. But if they do, I think they'd just be calling as well. So I actually quite like the shove here. As you said, most rivers we're just going to be going broke on anyway. And again, the slight difference here is I think that most of his bluffs are going to contain equity. So I think he'll end up continuing those, as opposed to a spot where some of the spots where villain is bluffing without any equity, he will obviously have a bunch of folds. So yeah, I quite like the shove here, especially against the sizing. Yeah, I think it's fine.
Yeah, he does go for a shove. We get called by... Okay, well, in this case, shoving is definitely fine. And also, if we do make the assumption that he's gonna bet stuff like Queen 10, Jacks and 10s here very often, then definitely I like the shove more. I just think when he goes half pot, he's gonna be a bit more polar, and I would definitely not think he's ever calling this hand, because that's what I was saying, like if he has stuff like King Jack here, I mostly expect him to bet here and probably bluff the river, while if I check shove, I think he's just gonna fold those hands. But apparently you're right, and he don't really fold anything. Of course, if this happens, shove is much better, but it's quite surprising.
I wouldn't expect the recreational to fold a hand like this, but then also just when he chooses the half pot on the size, recreationals are very happy to use just half pot with any type of hand as well. So I wouldn't assume that he's too polar either. Stephanie got timed out in chat. I'm not sure why. But she says I can see that the SBR is quite awkward after this sizing. And then Life Shukayak makes the same point as me as well. Villain's kind of pot committed himself with this sizing choice. So yeah, I do think most of his hands are going to have some form of equity, and then yeah, I don't think we have villain folding many hands after this turn size. But again, every villain is going to be different.
Yeah, actually something I didn't really consider is that once he bets so big on the turn, and he, if we called here, he just has 45 big blinds left into so many, he might be a bit reluctant to also bluff the river, so we might actually lose some value. But yeah, obviously, if he's so wide, again, going for a shove. Anything to add about this hand? Should we go to the next one?
Oh, good. Let's jump to another one.
Okay, we 3-bet ace-king offsuit against hijack. He goes 24 big blinds and we decide to go for a call. I don't think I like this, because I do agree that we can call ace-king sometimes, and if people under 4-bet, then, it might sometimes be higher EV to call than to shove and stuff. But I think what we kind of miss here is that his 4-bet size is very big. This should be around 20.5, maybe 21.5 at max. But when facing 4-bets, actually 2 big blinds influence what we should do a lot. So the odds for calling here get much worse. Therefore, I think I would always shove this. If he made it smaller, I don't mind having some calls. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's really, really good to notice, just what you mentioned, that the sizing that someone chooses does have a big impact. And we do obviously just get to call more when it's a smaller sizing as opposed to this bigger sizing. And now, yeah, with ace king here, blocking aces and kings, having lots of equity against queens and jacks, and also being able to get villain to fold out some of his bluffs as well is going to be fine. So just taking down this, 33 big blind pot here when we shove and villain folds, I think is a nice situation. So yeah, just always shoving. Don't think there's much else about pre-flop.
Yeah, but we do end up calling, which I actually think is a mistake against that size. And we face a 1/3 c-bet. In this situation, I think folding would be a massive blunder, especially if we call ace king pre-flop. We need to think that we beat all bluffs still, and even when he has values such as jacks or queens, even kings, we still have some equity. So yeah, I think calling ace king pre-flop and then folding on such a board would be terrible. I'm thinking if shoving makes any sense, but I don't really think so, because again, we're just gonna get worse to fold and better to call. So I think for me, this would just be a pure call if I ended up playing like this pre-flop. What about you, Paul?
Yeah, I agree. I think his sizing is interesting. Sometimes you see people using a small sizing on these boards. I think they should size up a little because a lot of their hands are going to miss. So they're four bet bluffs with king 10 or king jack, ace 10, ace jack suited type of hands, or even ace queen off. Or there's a lot of hands that miss. They're ace king as well, and then they only really have the value of say tens, jacks, queens, kings, aces. So I don't think they should bet with their full range. I think they should slightly size up, and this does seem to be sized up a little. But yeah, we'll just keep that in mind when you get into these situations on these type of boards. It's very different compared to, say, a king XX board where out of position really connects well with it and can go for a lot of range bets. But yeah, same as Alex, would definitely be calling here, wouldn't be folding.
Yeah, about what you said, I actually, that's the right way to play in theory, but I've been thinking, I've been studying a bit these 4-bet pots out of position, and if we go quarter here, they're supposed to fold almost 0% of their range, and then they're supposed to find a lot of thin raises. I think the way people play in reality, it's actually quite a good exploit to start range betting really small on this board, but it is not... it's not something that makes a lot of sense theoretically, as Paul says. So, yeah, exploitatively, I think it's a good strategy to implement. Just keep in mind, against very good opponents, you might not want to do that.
Just a comment from the chat. Doyle Smith says, can we talk about recreational assumed linear 4-bet range? How do we adjust to an assumed 2 linear 4-bet range?
I mean, it depends, first of all, what we are talking about, because if you are out of position, your 4-betting range should actually be quite linear. So, don't think
I think Doyle's talking about us as hero in position with ace king here against a recreational who 4-bets 2 linear.
Well, again, what does 2 linear mean? If we look at the 4-bet range here, it should be pretty linear already, and...
I guess he means when you take out too many of those king 10 suiteds, king jack suiteds, ace 10, ace jack suiteds, maybe some ace queen off as well.
Yeah, I still don't care. This hand is never fold. Whatever his range is, unless you know for sure it's just kings and aces, then you fold pre-flop. But you can't know that, and you basically split with a lot of very linear 4-bets, because a lot of those are gonna be ace king, right? He's still gonna have some ace queen, even if he's very linear. You have a lot of equity against queens and jacks, and moreover, you block kings and aces very heavily. So I mean, we probably should adjust by calling tighter. So maybe if we open a solver with king queen of spades, or with backdoor flush draws being called here sometimes against someone who's 3-betting too linear, I would just fold those, but ace king is just too good to fold.
Yeah, I agree. Other portions of your range might want to start folding, but obviously with this hand, it's too strong.
We do end up folding, which, yeah, I think this is a mistake on the flop, and pre-flop as well, and I think it's the kind of mistake that is actually going to affect your win rate quite a lot, because these are going to be spots that happen quite frequently, and I would assume that if you fold ace king here, you probably overfold a lot of spots to small c-bets, which is, yeah, not great. These are, not this one, but in general, these small spots that happen very often are going to influence your win rate way more than, calling a river or lean or stuff.
Okay, nice. Let's jump on to another.
Okay, I'm sorry for this, I'm not sure. Sorry. Yeah, before we jump into another hand, I would like to remind everyone that there is this promotion available where if you get 1 month of Essential or Elite Run It One subscription, you are going to get a free one on top of that if you use the code STREAM at checkout. Paul is going to link this in the chat.
Yeah, one moment before we move on. David says, "What's the plan after you float with Ace King?" There, so the plan is just to play, just to play how you normally would. So on the turn, then you can just reevaluate, right? If villain just starts jamming, then obviously we don't have a great hand, but we're still ahead of villain's bluffs here. So his Ace Queen, his Ace Jack, Ace 10 type of hands, like we said, we're ahead of those, and the King Jack, King 10 suiteds. If he's a recreational and he is maybe a little bit too tight and he's got those jacks and queens, we still have 2 overs. So yeah, we just play turn and river. So we could get to the turn and it goes check check, and then obviously we get to the river, we may bink a top pair. We may just end up getting to the point where turn goes check check, river goes check check, and we win against some of those weaker hands. So it's quite a hard question to say, what the plan is after the flop, because obviously it depends on what the turn and the river is.
Yeah, if he bets very small against, like, let's say the turns a blank, he bets like 1/4, I think we can still go for another call because we still beat bluffs, we still have equity on the river and so on. If he shoves, as Paul says, we just need to fold. So yeah, it really depends on the action. If he checks, I would really not be willing to bluff this hand against the recreational, especially because I don't think they are very willing to fold pairs on this kind of low textures.
Yeah.
Okay, we open 5-6 on the MP. This should be a mix open, however, if we have a recreational on the big blind, I would be looking to open this hand always. Here we probably have a rack in the small blind who's a bit short, so we should be a bit careful when they are shorter, but he's not really short enough to worry about him shoving often, so I think this is fine, just don't overdo it. And big blind calls. Thoughts on pre-flop you want to add?
No, just adding to that thought process of just keeping in mind who's behind you, because if villain 10 here is 21 big blinds, so would probably never open 5-6 because it has the sort of stack that is going to start shoving. And then also the hands that I do open, maybe I'd want to open maybe a little bit smaller so I can still open wide, because I don't want to be losing that extra half a big blind when a villain has a stack size that they can just start shoving with pre-flop. So just a couple of adjustments there that I think can add a little bit to your win rate.
Yeah, I personally open 2.2x, but I've been thinking opening 2x might be better because it's very, especially from the early positions, because it's very unintuitive how wide you should call as the big blind, especially like even in higher rake environments, we should call like a lot of even stuff like 7-6 and offsuit and 5-6 offsuit are gonna be almost break-even calls. So I think people are actually gonna make a bunch of mistakes against 2x open. So I think it's actually worth sizing down a bit. Plus, what Paul says, we're losing less when we have a shitty hand and we get 3-bet, 4-bet, whatever. Okay, we see a flop of ace, king, deuce. Big blind checks and we go for, I think this is 3/4. I think this is fine, especially with a backdoor flush draw. Wouldn't really bet without. Personally, I would go pot or slight overbet on these textures. I don't think it makes a lot of difference if you construct your strategy well, but yeah, I like seeing a big bet, and I like seeing this hand betting as well. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's good. Again, the closer you are to the button, just to keep in mind your range, you're going to have a lot of hands that miss this board, and so you want to, as Alexandra said, this is a great board to play polar, and you use a big size and check very often. But then as you start to move towards under the gun and even MP, you're going to have much more hands that just connect to this, because we're not going to be opening so many of these 5-6 or 7-8 suited type of hands. We're going to be much more connected to the ace and kings. So we can start to go for these like 3/4 sizes with a lot of our range in this spot. So I quite like this. And especially as under the gun, you're just going to really connect to this board and be able to put big blind in a real tough spot with these big sizes.
Yep, he calls turns queen of spades, and Yeah, I think here we should go quite polar. Something like a pot size or an overbet would work. And this particular hand, um, yeah, I think it's quite close. I would assume we want to barrel spades here more than hearts, because at this point, if we bet even pot, even three quarters, he should start folding a bunch of flush draws. So it's nice to unblock those. He doesn't really have as many backdoors, but we also can't really barrel all of our spades here. I think the problem with this hand is that he should still call on the flop some 5-3 of spades, some 5-4 of spades that should probably fold at this point. So we do block some bluffs. I would guess this is probably one of the worst flush draw combos to bet because of that. But if we had like 6-7 or 7-8, would probably be better. That being said, I don't mind the bet here, but I think this would be a low frequency. Yeah, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you make a good point there with obviously, 7-8 or 8-9 of spades continuing much more. Obviously, we're not going to be blocking some of the hands that they fold, but we're also going to be blocking more of their, imagine, backdoors. Maybe not. But as you say, right, this is a spot where the turn card is really good for us. We're going to want to have a lot of bets here because we're going to have aces, kings, ace king, ace queen. We're going to have jack 10 against the bigger sizing in this situation. I think villain should start to be folding on the flop with some of the jack 10. Some of their offsuit versions for sure, I would imagine. Just because of how strong our range is. And again, if we're going for a high frequency 3/4 bet, we may even also have some pocket queens in here. I know the solver I would imagine the solver would for sure bet some queens on the flop for that sizing, at least in under the gun. So given that this is such a great turn for us and we're going to have loads of value, we are going to want to have loads of bluffs. And we're not going to have loads of natural bluffs here because a hand like King 10 or King Jack is probably not going to want to continue all that often. Or a hand like, the Queen Jacks and Queen 10s they bet on the flop, probably not going to continue all that often. And a lot of our hands are going to be based around these broadways. So I do think a lot of these lower suited cards are going to want to be turned into bluffs. And then maybe even some hands like 3s, 4s, or 5s, if we open those, may also want to be turned into bluffs as well, just because we have so much value.
I think Queen Jack is actually an interesting one because if you think about it, I think that's actually quite a nice bluff because it blocks, like, when we bet 3/4 and he calls, it's not really like he has a lot of worse hands than a queen, except for draws. So he's gonna have ace-x, which is supposed to fold the turn quite often here, and king-x, which is probably folding quite frequently. And then we also block turns to pair, like king-queen and ace-queen, which is definitely going to be in his range as well in these positions. Along with blocking the straight and having a gut shot, maybe even being able to improve against them, like king-x of hearts. I actually think Queen Jack might be a nice bluff here.
Yeah, I actually agree with you. Queen 10, Queen Jack would actually make great bluffs because they do get some ace x to fold, they get some king x to fold, they block villains ace jack, ace 10, which is going to be their best calls with their ace x hands. So yeah, Queen Jack, Queen 10, I definitely would turn that into a bluff as well. But yeah, I just trying to highlight how we have so much value here. We do have to take some bluffs from other portions of our range that might not be as natural, I think.
Yeah. We bet again for 3/4, which I think I would like sizing up here, because if you think about it, I don't think this is a spot where we want to bet ace jack too often, right? So I think most of our value range is going to be condensed around 2 pair plus. Therefore, I would like a slightly bigger bet, but it's not a huge deal.
Stephanie asked in the chat, villain gets to fold his smaller flush draws here to a bet 75 or bigger. If you're talking about on the flop, then definitely no. But if you're talking about on the turn, which I assume you are, yeah, I think some of the weaker hearts may be starting to become indifferent. I think against a pot size, they would definitely start to become indifferent. I think you would. You're going to have a lot of combos of spades and hearts that call the flop, and I don't think you get to call them all on the turn. So against a pot size, I think they do become indifferent. Against bet 75, I think it is a bit closer. What do you think, Alex?
I think pretty much all the flush draws without any added equity should fold here on this texture, because if you think about it, you're gonna have ace x of spades, right? You're gonna have king x of hearts, queen x of hearts. You're gonna have a bunch of combo draws, maybe even those like a jack high flush draw, 10 high flush draws. I think those might be indifferent, but like all the lower ones, I'm almost certain it's just a fold.
Okay, cool.
We can shove.
J Poker says, does the promotion also work if you already have a subscription? I'm not sure about that, but we can ask Run It Once and get back to you. If you're in the Run It Once Discord, or if you're in our Discord, we can get back to you on that. Or have that information for next week's study session. And then Doyle Smith says, what sizing would you use here on the turn? Would you overbet with this combo? Like 125%. So yeah, as Alex said, we could use this sizing. I think is fine. We can use pot sizing, and then again the 125%, 130, I think is also going to be good. I think it's just worth noting that this queen is going to be really good for your turn, for your range compared to villain, and they're going to be in a tough spot with their calling range. They're going to have obviously every combo of ace-x that they had pre-flop, which is going to be in a tough spot. So I think just making sure that you understand the turn is really good for you, and then choosing a big size is going to be important.
Okay, we bet, and villain calls. River's a king. He checks. I think this spot is going to be quite interesting because, well, first of all, I'm not sure how often we're going to bet king-queen on the flop. I assume not very frequently. Therefore, if we don't bet king-queen...
No, I think again, we could pull this up in the solver, but I think, especially if it was under the gun first big blind, this would be close to a range bet. And again, in MP, because the ranges are so tight, I think we get to bet like king-queen and king-jack even at some frequency.
Maybe, yes, but like if villain doesn't really bet it in reality, then things change, right? And I don't think most people are going to find these bets with king-queen, even if they are bets in reality for three-quarters, in theory for three-quarters.
Yeah, that's true.
So yeah, we can actually pull this up because it's quite an interesting hand, but I don't think we bet very many king-x on the turn. But that being said, we still have ace-king, which he probably doesn't have all that often. And definitely we can't bluff everything. I'm thinking how this performs as a bluff. And yeah, thinking first of all we barrel more spades. We should barrel more spades than hearts on the turn. It means that we retrieve with more spades. And then I think having hearts at this point is actually really nice of a bluff because, as we said, he should fold a bunch of hearts on the turn. And then I think one of his main calls here and best hands is going to be king-x of hearts. And he's probably going to call all king-x of hearts on the flop and then again on the turn. So I think the flush draws blocking king-x are going to be really nice to bluff here. This one, I'm not sure. I mean, it's very, very low in our range, but it doesn't block any. If anything, it probably blocks folds with ace-5 and ace-6 of spades. Yeah, I think I would mix this probably bet at low frequency, but looking at it, I think it has quite bad properties. So either giving up or bluffing at a low frequency.
Yeah, I think it's going to be pretty close. I think this hand is quite interesting because there's so many different assumptions that we would make from theory and then in reality. I think another one is just like a pre-flop defend with Jack 10 off. You're going to get some players in the big blind who will defend always. You're going to get some players who will under defend that. I think in theory against a 2.5x from MP, it probably is close to a mix. And then again, if we're using like a pot size bet on the flop or 75%, some of those offsuit versions I think are going to be indifferent. Now in reality, some people are way over going to defend those on the flop, and so the turn isn't as great for us. And I think, I think there's just a lot of different things that are going on in this hand where if we look at a solver, there's going to be a lot of things we have to talk about that may not be reality and is different to the solver.
Yeah, I wouldn't be super worried about Jack 10 here because even if he has that, I assume it's going to be most often a check raise on the turn, especially when we don't overbet and the board is 2 flash draws. But just in general, I think some of our betting range loses value here. Two draws miss, so I think because of that they might first of all overcall ace-x on the turn and they might look us up with ace-x on the river, which they shouldn't very often. So I don't think this spot is going to be particularly overfolded because of how this run out looks. And if I have a hand that's already like in theory not great to bluff, and I think the spot is not going to be overfolded either. I would be a bit reluctant to bluff it, but I might be wrong. This might be a better bluff than it looks at the first glance. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think you're right there. Just taking into reality of who you're playing against and if they're going to overfold or underfold the river. Jay Poker says, what do you think about using a full range C bet strategy on 50, 100 now because the pool is under check raising?
I think that is a good strategy on some boards, but specifically on this Ace King X board. I mean, yeah, if you range bet, they should find a bit more check raises, but this is not particularly a board where they should find a bunch of check raises anyway. They should probably overfold compared to MDF as well, so it's not like we're benefiting a bunch from their overfolds, which is actually where I think most of the money comes from. Where we go small range bet is not only that they under check raise, but the majority of the field way overfolds to that. Although in these tight range positions, particularly on Ace King Deuce, they should probably not check raise match and fold a lot. So I'm not sure we are actually making a great exploit with going range 1/3. So I'd rather be looking to pile in a lot of money with my strong hands.
Yeah, what I just wanted to quickly add to that as well. Something you might find here in these tighter range positions is that when you use a pot size or a slight overbet, especially again in undergun MP, because your range connects so well with that, some villain would have to in theory start folding some very strong hands on this flop. So if you're using an overbet, some offsuit ace X, it should be folded. Now, if your range is really strong and they're going to continue too much on the flop, maybe using that slight overbet would overperform because they're going to continue too much. So the stronger portions of your range is going to be making more money against portions of their range that they should be feeling indifferent with on the flop. And then Stephanie asks, this feels like a triple barrel bluff. We have no equity. I was actually thinking of making a video, maybe for Run It Once or for ourselves on FNC Poker about this, because what you actually find in the solver is that the solver doesn't care about whether we have no equity on the river. It cares about how our position is going to defend, right? And whether we have a hand that blocks out of position's calls or whether we block their folds and these sort of concepts. So 5-6 here, if we look in the solver, I would imagine it wouldn't be a full frequency bet. It wouldn't be a full frequency check. It would be maybe a mix, or maybe it is just a check. And in this situation, as Alex said, we want to be blocking hands that are going to call. And I don't think that this has the properties that is blocking any calls. So I wouldn't think too much about whether we have equity or no equity. Sometimes it makes more money to just check behind a hand that you know is going to lose, because in reality, and even in a solver, the solver is just going to continue too much. And then in reality, people will continue too much, and we're just going to have a hand that is going to be a terrible bluff because of that reason.
And another thing I would keep in mind here is, obviously I can't be sure of that, but on the turn, especially after about 3/4 on the flop, I think pretty much most of our bluffs are going to be draws, right? So high equity, and I'm not sure if our hero here thinks enough about, okay, which ones we should check back or which ones we should just bet. And if he just bets all the flush draws with hearts and spades, and then we get to the river with all of those, then it's probably like we really need to be selective. We can't just bluff our whole range here for sure. So the more we bet turn with our draws, the worse I think it is to bluff river. But the less draws we have, then obviously the better it becomes.
Yeah. Okay, should we jump to the next one?
We open small blind and we get raised and then big blinds. BVB through bet pot. Yeah, I like the call here. Not sure if in higher rake environments this should ever be a fold, but I think even if it's a mix, if we play well, we can probably get it back. Thoughts on pre-flop?
Yeah, I would more edge on the side of caution here. If it was a mix and a solver, I would be careful at lower stakes, just because people under 3-bet the big blind and they probably 3-bet too linear as well. So they're probably not finding as many of those, Jack 3 suited type of hands or Jack 4 suited type of hands that they should be finding as 3-bet. So yeah, I would actually be a little bit careful here in a higher rake environment. Obviously, if you have notes against who you're playing against, or if you have a HUD and you know they're a reg, I think this is fine to continue.
I'm not sure is this hand a mix actually in theory. I think like the lower suited connectors will be. I think the 10-9 will still be a pure call, I assume. Not sure.
Yeah, I'll check on the side if you want to run through this hand.
Yeah, sure. We check. I don't think I would find any leads here. I like this and villain, but half pot. Now these spots, blind versus blind 3-bet pots are quite interesting because I think most villains tend to bet a bit too often, but like there's so many assumptions. So first of all, like if someone is 3-betting correctly pre-flop and he has all this very polar range with a lot of trash, there aren't really many boards where you are allowed to range bet. But for a lot of villains, especially lower stakes, it's just easy to like see you're in position with a weak hand or just press the bet button. So I think a lot of people actually see bet these spots a bit too much, which incentivizes us. Like we should already have a lot of check raises, but if they bet too much, we are incentivized to check raise even more. In regards to this particular hand, a pattern that you see is that you actually want to check raise gut shots here without flash draws or backdoor flash draws, because a flash draw can check call and then check shove on the turn. A combo drop, it's good enough to do that. And the backdoor flash draw really doesn't want to get shoved on, therefore we use the other ones. I think in reality people don't really 3-bet all in or 3-bet enough for any size here, probably overfold, so I wouldn't mind using this one as well. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with your thoughts there. I think you make good points. Just wanted to go back to the last hand because we realized in chat that we didn't actually get to see what happened, and yeah, apologies guys. It's our first stream in a while. Okay, so we went for an overbet. Villain calls.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like if they don't fold an ace here, this is probably bad. If they don't fold any ace, I mean.
Yeah. And again, I don't want to go on to this hand too much, but I would imagine this ace-8 on the river is definitely a hand that should be mixed. Maybe even close to folded more than mix. And if people are calling this type of hand, then again we don't want to be thinking about, okay, we don't have any equity, I bluff. We want to be thinking, just what's a great hand to block value in villain's range.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, yeah, sorry guys.
Okay, so he bets half pot. We go for a very small check raise. I think in theory we should use a bigger size here, but in practice, if we assume people are kind of betting too much and overfolding, I don't mind this, although on this very, very draw heavy board, I think it's not that easy to overfold. So I would probably still use a bigger size. The good thing is the smaller we go, the more I like actually going for a check raise with this hand. Yeah, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think this size is fine. If villain has enough hands pre-flop, 3-bet, and then on the flop as well, betting. One thing I would just keep in mind at lower stakes, and again, this is just an exploitative idea, is that people sometimes play their hand rather than their range, and you may see someone going for a range bet or like a 33% size in with some weaker portions of their range, and then going at half pot with some stronger portions of their range. Again, if we have no reads on villain, we haven't seen him do something like that, then it's irrelevant at this stage. But I think that's worth keeping in mind if you're playing against people that you play against quite often, because I think you can get out of line then, when they're using some smaller sizes, and maybe be a bit more careful when they're using bigger sizes. But yeah, I think going for a check raise here with this hand is going to be perfectly fine. Going for a call is going to be fine as well.
Yeah, I agree. He calls the turns 6. And again, I think this is a very similar situation to the previous hand, because if we extend a bit our check raising range and even go smaller, I think there's an assumption that he's overfolding, and when we expect him to overfold, we should start being quite careful on the turn. And if we think of our range, we don't really check raise total air. So And also a lot of the stuff that we check raise get there right now. 4-5 is a straight. We should sometimes check raise that stuff like 7-6, which is two pair. 8-9 gains some extra equity. If we check raise ace jack, for example, is still strong enough to barrel. Our stats are strong enough. So I think this is going to be a relatively high frequency bet, but this is probably one of the worst hands to continue with because we block a lot of folds with backdoor flush draws that should continue, especially to that size on the flop. We don't gain any kind of extra equity, right? If we had 8-9, now we have an open-ender. So yeah, I think pretty much everything in our range is better to bet than this one. I really don't like these blockers. And I think all of our bluffs are gonna be better. We can't really just barrel everything that we check raise with, and I think this one is one of the first I would give up. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I mostly agree with that as well. I think it's a good point you make. We want villain to have maybe queen nine of clubs or king ten of clubs type of hands that are going to be folding on this turn. So don't think we have the greatest blockers. Again, if we were continuing 9-10 here, would prefer to maybe continue with those diamond or heart combinations. I think so. Yeah, I think I'd be just careful on this turn now because again, just keep in mind at lower stakes, if people are under 3 betting the big blind and then on the flop, if they're playing more of their hand and they're calling your check raise, you do just have to be careful now because you're getting into the territory where villain's range is going to be way too condensed towards stronger portions of their range. So yeah, sometimes you think, I have equity, I have 10 high, I don't really want to check fold, but sometimes that's going to be the best option given the actual range that villain arrives with here. And again, if you guys use solvers like GTO Wizard and Pio and things like this, you always want to take into account what's reality. If he's under 3 betting pre-flop and he's overfold into the check raise, then when he does get here on the turn, we do just have to be a lot more careful.
Yeah, I agree. But I think even in a solver, this would mostly be a check. As you said, if you have 10-9 of hearts or diamonds, I would be much happier to bet. But this one, not really.
Yeah, for sure. Okay.
We go 3/4, which... Yeah, I'm not sure how much I like the size here. I think it's fine if we want to keep betting our ace-jack, king-jack type of hands, which I think we do here. But I would, this hand, I wouldn't bet, especially when we go that big.
Yeah.
And he folds, it works out. But yeah, I think we need to, what we need to think of, which is something that I've been guilty of myself. I was like, I have equity, let's just bet. I don't have showdown value and just ending up over bluffing a lot of spots, and particularly spots that aren't overfolded anymore because they were already overfolded on the previous street. So I think one thing to keep in mind is that we should be a bit more selective with our bluffs, and when we have a lot of bluffs available, just think a bit more of the properties of each of those and not just blindly bet.
Yeah, I think another thing that some people can think in these situations as well is that, I don't want to check fold, but that's not taken into account. Sometimes villain is just going to check back on the turn, right? They may have a hand like ace-8 of spades, they check back and we've been king-8 on the river, and then we get to stack villain with the best hand, or we get to get a big bet off villain with the best hand. And very often you are going to check here, or they're going to bet, and you're going to have a fold. But there are going to be situations where it goes check. The river's a 9 or a 10, and you have the best hand now, or the river's an 8, you have the best hand now. And again, if it goes check, maybe there's some villains you may want to bluff against on the river. It's not like you always have to just check and give up because villain's not always going to bet the turn.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point, that you can also check and bluff rivers, because you should check raise some weaker jack X that don't want to bet on the turn but should go for value on the river, or you could have some hand depends what the river is. You could check raise, I don't know, 5-6 that checks the turn and maybe you hit a 6 on the river, or a 5, whatever. There are options where you're not just check folding this hand. So. Also, you should check here to check raise some value as well, like sets or I don't know, good jack X. So yeah, you have value still on the river if it goes check. You should have.
Okay, should we do one last one quickly?
All right. We open hijack MP, and we get called by the small blind. We see a king jack 8 board. He checks, and here I think if we were against the big blind, we can start bluffing this hand sometimes, I assume. Usually, if this 8 was a much lower card, I think we're gonna bluff the pairs way more often, but probably in these earlier situations it's fine to bluff 8-9 as well. Although against the small blind, which is calling, whose calling range is much tighter than the big blind and is probably going to be condensed around high cards and ace-x and under pairs, I think this is a bit too middling to bet against that range. What do you think?
Yeah, I was just going to touch on that. I think I wouldn't view this as a bluff if we bet here. I wouldn't be using a big size against the recreational here. I would just play my hand. I think that we could bet here, and we're going to see some villains make a mistake with maybe sixes set or sevens or fives with a spade, maybe calling too much. Maybe they have too many hands like 9-10 off or queen 10 off and ace queen and all these type of hands. So we could bet here and get value from worse. And again, I think we could just bet small here against the recreational, maybe even just getting some of their pairs to fold, or even just getting a hand like ace-5 of hearts to fold, I think is fine as well. So I would just bet here for small size and just play my hand strength, really. And if I get called, then obviously I'm just going to nearly always slow down on turns against recreational.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of this, as you say. If we were playing this against a regular on the big blind, I think this plays fine. Against a rec, calling the small blind, I think that, as Paul says, it's very different. And yeah, I don't like this. I think betting small, as he says, is the best option, but checking is probably better than this against the recreational.
Yeah. And again, given be aware of his stack size as well, right? Because we're betting quite a big size against a guy who's got half a stack here. So I think we want to be selective, and I'd use this size if I had a strong hand, right? So if I've got ace king, I'm happy to use this size because villain's probably got too much king 10 off here, right? Or he's never folding queens if he's ever got queens, or he's going to overcall some of his hands. Eight, if he had 8-9 of hearts, he's probably going to call against this size sometimes. So I would use this with the stronger portions of my range. With the middling portions of my range, I'm going to use a small bet, and then with a hand like 4-5 of hearts, I might just give that up on the flop, right? Because recreationals are going to overcall, and it's not really an attractive hand to be betting. So against recreational, really think about what your hand wants to achieve, and the bet sizes to go with that.
Yeah, those are good points. He goes for a call, turns at 3, he checks, and yeah, I mean, for me it's quite difficult to talk about what I would do here, because I would never be in this spot against a recreational. So if we were here against a big blind regular, I can talk about that, because I would play that like this. I think this is actually a nice bluff to continue. I mean, it blocks 9-10, which is bad, but then it blocks 2 pairs and very, very strong calls. Probably doesn't have much showdown value. He should already fold some king x and jack x on the turn. But I think all of those start becoming quite false for a recreational. Therefore, I wouldn't be looking to continue here. But I'm not in this spot in the first place.
Yeah, I wouldn't be in this spot in the first place. I'd be betting, 1.5 big blinds on the flop and keeping his range wide. Once I bet this size, if I ever betted this size, which I wouldn't against recreational, I would just be looking to check down now and hopefully try to win against an ace 10, an ace queen, a queen 10 type of hand, and 9-10 type of hand. And I wouldn't be putting any more money into the pot.
Yeah, I agree. But we do keep betting, which again I'm not a huge fan of.
Yeah, I think this is just a mistake.
Yeah.
And then let's see what happens on river.
The hero shoves, which, I guess it's fine at this point, but we really, really don't need to be in this spot at all. I don't really know what I would do here, but
yeah, again, we were just putting ourselves into a spot here where a recreational calls king 9, king 10, right? They're gonna way overcall this spot, and we get here, we don't have any equity when we get to river, but again, recreational is going to make a lot of calling mistakes, right? They're going to overcall very often. I think we've misplayed flop and turn here, and I probably would try to not compound that error on the river. because I think when we go for this hand here, for this here, I would imagine if you looked in a solver and we had like ranges that were appropriate on the river, someone would probably have to start folding some king jack or something, right? And like a recreational's never going to fold that hand. Or if a recreational has ace king here, which he can definitely have, they don't always 3-bet that hand. It should just always be a fold if you had some solver that was solving for this sort of spot. And I just don't think a recreational is ever going to fold that type of hand, right? Because they block ace 10, they have top pair. So yeah, I would just try to not compound my flop and turn error here, and I would just give up. And I would expect to always lose, but I expect to get called way too often on this river.
Yeah, I'm not actually sure about that, because I think what actually adds up to what you said is that yes, someone should probably fold some of these hands here, but I think a recreational is just gonna. It depends how wide he is, right? But if he's gonna have a lot of low king X here, especially like offsuit ones, I don't think he's gonna call off all of his king X. I think he's gonna fold some stuff like jack X that call the turn, because they are probably gonna call the turn with jack X. So maybe some queen X of spades. So I don't think, like, in terms of frequency, once we get here on the river, he's going to necessarily overcall. That's why I don't really hate the bluff, but this means that the flop and turn are gonna be much, much worse because he's already overcalling. So like when we bet the turn, we kind of, especially for this size, we kind of expect him to fold a jack or some bad king X. But if he doesn't, that's just like burning money.
Yeah. Good point there about him potentially getting here with way too many, jack X and king X, and this bluff not being as bad as I first saw it. But again, I'm not sure how a recreational villain will be playing here. And if he starts calling you with king 10 or queen 10 or queen 9 here, that's like, it's a devastating outcome.
We do get a fold, but again, that doesn't mean the hand was played well necessarily.
Yeah.
All right. Should we wrap it up now?
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Apologies, we were a little bit rusty. We haven't run one of these streams in a while, and hopefully next time we get to give you all the action before we end up moving on. Thanks for joining. Obviously, there's still the discount. If you guys are looking to join Run It Once, then you can take advantage of that. I'll put the link in the chat now one last time. And if you guys would like to join our Discord, I'll also put a link for our Discord. There's a lot of people posting hands, and we're going to try and run some more sessions in our Discord as well going forward. So if you want to get involved with more cash game players,
that's one. And also over our Discord, you can also send us hands to review in this Run It Once stream. So if you do want your hands reviewed, make sure to join it and shoot us a message, and we'll see you on the next stream. Thanks for